Sorry, Deb.
All yours.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. Apologies. I actually need 1 second to close my door.
Okay, no worry, no problem.
Okay, so bear with me, everyone. I'm a little sick this morning, so it is maybe a little bit of a nasally presentation. Um, but I'm happy to share the nutrient budgeting app with you and go over it. So for this, I want to do about 40 minutes of presentation, and then we can spend the rest of the time talking about the tool and maybe doing live examples of your suggestions. So of that, I'll probably spend the first 15 to 20 minutes talking about why should we do a nutrient budget, and the rest is how. How do we use this tool to make our nutrient budget? So I will brush through some history. What is our nutrient budget? Why do we use a nutrient budget? And getting ready to create a nutrient budget. So what do we need for information to use this tool? Whether we're using the website app or even just an Excel sheet or pen and paper in your own home, and how that math works to do them. And then I'll do a demo. And I have screenshots shared in these PowerPoints that can be really clean to go through. And then I also have the tool open so that we can do some live playing with the website. So the nutrient budgeting app started from Dr. Martinez at the University of Manitoba as part of his natural systems agriculture classes, and it expanded in collaboration with, at the time, a student, Dr. Joanne Thiessen Martens, into an Excel sheet that farmers could use to calculate their imports and exports. Pretty basic. The one caveat is they also added the focus on green manure biomass. So our ability to calculate how much nitrogen fixation we have in those legume years. And while there's a lot of nutrient calculators, especially in conventional agriculture, so they can calculate what their fertilizer inputs are, there's not a ton that allow you to calculate how much fertilizer input you can save, which is really unique to this tool and is a really great part of adding it to your rotation. The early version was a little cumbersome to use. A lot of farmers in Manitoba got to be the guinea pigs to test this Excel sheet, and the consensus was it works, it's great, but it is hard. So they reached out to POTIF, Prairie Organic Development Fund, and Manitoba Organics, and it was turned into a web-based platform. So this was a collaboration between Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and the last period of funding has been done in Manitoba as well as the training, which is why I'm speaking to you today. So, what is a nutrient budget? This is just a tool to document our nutrients coming in and coming out of a system, a landscape, or even the whole globe. I really like this graphic, and it's the one I always choose to share when I'm doing training because this is for the entire globe of the Earth. And we have different systems that we can go, are we within budget or not? One of the examples being our stratospheric ozone depletion. This is one that if we talked 2 decades ago, we would have been outside of boundary layer and not in a budget that our planet could sustain. But we've pivoted as a society. We stopped putting leaking into our ozone layer, and we are now within a proper budget that we can maintain as a planet. We talk about phosphorus and nitrogen are ones that, as a whole, this is a non-renewable resource when we're mining our phosphorus from the soil. And we are mining more than we can continue to maintain. So this is not renewable. We are not within budget that as a planet we can sustain. So we could talk about this with anything in the earth. It's just, is it a circular system? Is this budget sustainable? When we talk about our farm, we're going to talk about our inputs being our feed, our fertilizer, our straw, if we're bale grazing, and then our nitrogen fixation, our legume biomass, what's growing. For our outputs, we're going to talk about plant products. You could export your animal product. We don't put that into the budget as much, but we do have the ability to graze as a removal for the plant stand, not the cows, but what they're eating, you're removing. And hay, straw, anything else you might be taking off your land. What we're not talking about as much is volatilization, what's leaving your farm unintentionally. Leaching, are we losing things to run off in our water system? Or are they going down into the soil? And then this magic box internally, where we have this internal flow in our farm. And this can be what we know of like cows grazing our stubble is not bringing anything in to our farm and it's not really taking a lot out, but there is this internal flow of making nutrients more available, of adding bacteria and healthy microbes to our soil. And that's not part of our nutrient budget, but it is really important. So I just call that the magic box in the middle. So with our nutrient budgeting app, we have a bunch of different micronutrients, macronutrients we talk about in plants. So from the biggest picture, we have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, building blocks of plants. They need these to grow. They have them. When we get into our primary macronutrients, we have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are all really important and are key macronutrients. And then we get into secondary macros, so our sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and then all of those micronutrients that we need, but in really small amounts. Those are amendments. If we're doing them, it's once a decade, if more. For this tool, we're going to specifically talk about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur. And just sticking to that scope, these are the four that we deemed the three most macro, and then for a secondary macro was sulfur. So when we're defining the scope of our nutrient budget, we can talk about a single field or the whole farm. We can talk about a single year or multiple years. And this can be really helpful when we're looking at our system as a whole or drilling down and looking at individual fields on our farm. An individual field might tell us that we have been exporting for years and we have a deficit, but maybe we have livestock or we're right next to a, a hog barn where we're bringing in a bunch of manure and it's specifically going on these 1 acres. We might have a glutton of fertility on another acre. So if we look at our whole farm system, we might be able to see that, oh, we actually have excess nutrients here, but not enough nutrients somewhere else. And maybe we can use our management tools to actually import nutrients from one field to the other. And then long-term management, green manures for nitrogen and occasional manure inputs. If we're looking at our entire farm, we can strategically choose which field we want to put in what phase of a rotation. We can decide where our fields are, and maybe we want to cut one short and put it in green manure earlier if we're seeing a deficit. So why should you use this? I think we've had a few examples, but balancing our inputs, we can reduce the input cost by avoiding over-fertilization. And this even applies to organic farmers. If we are putting excess manure on land that doesn't need it, we're spending more money for fertility than we need on those acres. We can minimize the nutrient loss to waterways, protecting our environment, but also saving our pocketbook. We are not trying to fertilize the water system, we're trying to fertilize our crops. And improving rotations can help with soil fertility and crop yield. Improved crop rotations, I think you guys have heard it all, but when we have a balanced rotation, we're building more soil organic matter, and that's helping our soil water infiltration, which is helping our crop yield. And it's all this interconnected system where if everything is healthy, we're more resilient. So we need nutrients to grow our plants, and ag systems routinely we have an issue in ag as a whole of we export nutrients to the cities, we send our food away, and we need to replace those nutrients for both short-term and long-term sustainability of agriculture. So what can our nutrient budget app do? Well, we can identify a deficit or a surplus. We can talk about the total nutrient quantities in our crop rotation. We can indicate the size of our deficit. So is this a little deficit or big? And we can provide information to help you make your management decisions. What it can't do is make those management decisions for you. So it can't account for the internal cycling, that magic box in the middle. It can identify crop nutrient deficiencies. So this is all analysis of what you've imported, whether it's manure or green manure, but maybe it's not bioavailable. Maybe you put rock phosphate on and you can't actually access it yet. So you don't know what might actually be bioavailable to your plants and what is actually maybe a crop nutrient deficiency, even if you're showing enough soil fertility. It can't estimate the nutrient loss to the environment, so what you've been maintaining from the nutrient imports and what you've lost. And it can't help make management decisions. It will not tell you what to do. It will just show you what's maybe going on. So this tool works best in conjunction with other tools, soil tests, a visual observation, getting down in the dirt and pulling up your roots and seeing, do you have good nodulation on your legumes? Do you see visual signs of infertility in your crops? Are you seeing phosphorus deficiency in your green matter? And taking it one step further with plant tissue tests, getting a foliar test to look at what nutrients are in my plant, what can it access from the soil, and putting all of that information into the nutrient budgeting app will help make the nutrient budgeting app more accurate and give a better understanding for your budget. All of these tools work together. So, a great question, it can help with when to add your nutrients, like putting it in before your alfalfa year or after. And we can go over that. How much nutrients to add, it can't answer how. It's not going to tell you which nutrient or how to add that. As in like compost or uh, pelletized chicken manure or what specifically you're going to do to get the nutrients into your field. So I really like this drawing as well, is again talking about your imports, what comes into your farm, and your outputs, your crop offtakes. But this farm gate boundary is again this magic box in the middle that we have cows turning biomass into manure that can break down and be composted on our fields, that can be more bioavailable nutrients. Again, it's not an import or export, but it is nutrient cycling in our field. The other is what level of budget we do. So in this case, we can have a low budget, and this would be coming onto the app and using the academic values there. We could spend 30 minutes and make a hypothetical or extrapolate what maybe we have on our farm. It can be useful for farm budgeting, but is not as detailed. A medium farm budget requires some analysis or assumptions. It's using your actual records. We're not able to distinguish everything, but we like leaching or nitrogen fixation, but we're doing soil samples. We're doing those foliar tests. We're doing analysis to say, okay, what do we actually see, and using that data to make our budget. And then a high system would be like the U of M, and when they're drilling down to be like, exactly why did this happen in their research plots. They're looking at carbon cycling and modeling systems, looking at volatilization and methane emissions. They're looking at soil temperature. They're taking all of these things. So for us, we're going to really work on that medium scale field budget is the gold standard if we can do some soil sampling, some foliar tests, but even a low budget is still going to help us. So we can look back, we can look forward as a planning tool. We can go back to say, what if I had done something different? So getting ready, we need to know our import and export. So information for our import, we want the quantity of a product. Now this can be in pounds or bushels per acre, and we get that from our farm record. So what's your seeding rate? 100 pounds per acre. Nutrient concentration. This is something we can get from literature standard data. So in the app itself, if I have my wheat, it will say this is an NPKS value for wheat, and it will automatically put that in. If we have crops that we're sending away for a lab analysis, and maybe you're getting your wheat tested with Canada Grain Commission, and when they're checking falling number and everything, they also check the fertility for your wheat sample. This is not a common thing to have, but if you know exactly what's in your wheat, or if you're looking at seed breeding and doing that analysis, you can put in your results from a lab analysis. Cooking. Okay. So getting ready to create your budget, we want to know for nitrogen fixation what the plant biomass is. And this we can get from our farm records. If we cut it for hay, we know exactly how many tons we had. If we are instead grazing it, we can estimate based on how many days the cows were able to feed. We know how many tons we might have. If we're doing a green manure and plowing it under, we need to just visually estimate how much do you think you had? How tall was it? And we can get really detailed with this and do a calculated value. And this is when you can walk out to your field and take a nice square meter section and cut down everything that's growing within that square meter. And if we cut down everything in that square meter, we can say, okay, let's take it to my house, dry it in the oven, and weigh it. Let's pull out all of the non-legumes in that so that I can get the exact amount or percentage of legume by weight compared to other things growing. So my flat grass doesn't count. And we can get really detailed in exactly how many pounds per acre we're seeing of legume. And this is just pounds per acre of anything, specifically percentage of legume is what we want to know for nitrogen fixation. So again, from your farm records, or we can do that calculated value. I like to say that there's never 100% legume crop. Even in a beautiful alfalfa year, you maybe have some weeds growing in, so 95% legume is as much as I'm typically using when we have clean examples. And lastly, we want the nitrogen concentration, the nitrogen concentration in that plant. So if we have the ability to take cuttings from our legume plants and send them for a lab analysis, that's going to give us the best result of what's actually in the plant. And that is what is bioavailable because that's what they're uptaking, which helps us know what they're fixating. If we don't have that, that's okay. And we have literature standard data. And the standard data we have is based on research that's been done in the prairies on nitrogen fixation in legume crops. So this was actually something we just updated this last October, just before the launch, so that we could be more accurate with this. And in future, as research continues to progress and we study these things more, we will continue to update this tool to be as accurate as possible. So the last thing is our export and what we need. So our crop yield, that's just our farm records. What did you pull off in bushels per acre, or in pounds per acre? And coefficient, this is that nitrogen percentage in the crop itself. And that's the only thing. For the coefficient, we're almost entirely using standard literature data. I'm not sending my wheat away to get a nitrogen analysis on it, so I'll just use the academic values, which we actually are very accurate on from how many years we've been checking crop yields and what they export from our farms for fertilizer input. So the math behind this is we're just taking the quantity of product and timesing it by that nutrient coefficient to get the nutrient export. So if I had 40 bushels of wheat harvested at 2.5% nitrogen, I know I have 60 pounds per acre of nitrogen exported. Each calculation is really simple. It's when we add several in a row over several years that we start to get complicated. This is where that Excel sheet started to become really cumbersome. So an example being an import of pea and oat. We've put that in. Deb, can you see my mouse when I'm on my monitor?
Yep, I can.
Okay, nice. So with that pea and oat, we've imported a tiny bit of NP, K, and S just from the seed itself. And I like to remind people that even in crop loss years, always put your seed in because there's a little bit of fertility there. And what that biomass of peas did was a nitrogen fixation. So we've netted some positive nutrients. We import for the next year was wheat and export wheat. So we have imported tiny bits with that seed and exported a significant amount with our wheat yield. So at this point, our overall net, we've still gained nitrogen from that pea year, but we've lost some phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur from that wheat export. So this is essentially what's happening inside the tool. So I'll go to showing you the nutrient budgeting app. So these are the screenshots on PowerPoint slides, just so nothing's moving around. We know we can go through it cleanly, and then I'll pull up an example on the actual website. So you have to sign in to make an account. This is so you can come back and change your data year after year, and be able to add things and put things in past. We do not keep your email. We can't even access your email, actually. It's immediately encrypted when you make an account. So this is all anonymous and completely private. The one exception being the farm inputs and outputs you're putting are available to the research team at the University of Manitoba when we choose to extrapolate it, and it's so that they can use that to hopefully develop better tools for this in future. So they can go, how are farmers using this tool and how can we make it better? How can we better fit people's needs? So again, that's all anonymous and your data will not be accessed in any other way. So for my fields, we can start. This is when you first open what you'll see, and you can name a specific field you're looking at. This can be a layman's name, number, whatever you use to remember, and the acreage. The acreage is optional, but it depends on what values you use. And this comes later, that if you want to put something in as bushels per acre, you're great. But if you want to put something in as just your total bushels of yield, you need to have the acreage listed, otherwise it won't be able to do the calculation. And then what year we want to start with. So in this example, I'm actually going to go back in time and we'll start at 2014 and we're going to use a Glenlee example. So this is from the Natural Systems Agriculture Department, and they have the Glenlee farm, and they have done 4-year crop rotation for decades now. In 2 years of alfalfa, a year of wheat, and flax. And they've done this in 3 different systems: organic with no inputs, organic with a composted cattle manure, and a conventional system. And I'm not going to touch on the conventional system, but I will look at both the no inputs and inputs with manure. So when we open, we have 3 categories: nitrogen fixation, our imports, and exports. And at the bottom will tell us our subtotal for that year. I like to start with my imports because that's how I usually start my season, is importing into my field. So we're looking at this alfalfa rotation. So year 1, we're seeding our alfalfa. And we're going to seed at 15 pounds per acre standard moisture content. So again, we've brought a tiny bit of nutrients in with that seed. Our exports, they actually did cuttings of that alfalfa every year. So I'm going to figure out what they cut for year 1, and I'm putting in half a ton, really, 1,100 pounds per acre. So it's the first year. It's not a huge alfalfa crop, and 15% moisture as the dry. So this has already been dried when we're taking this. If we were cutting for silage and it's really wet, then we're going to take our mass and our moisture content and put it in as the wet weight. This is where pounds per acre matters. If you don't put acres at the top, you can't put your total pounds of bales, but that might be helpful if you're cutting. And now we have a deficit. We cut all this alfalfa, we've lost nitrogen, but we didn't account for the nitrogen fixation. So we go back to nitrogen fixation. I'm going to call it hay pasture, and I'm going to put the same biomass in that I exported. So this is where I want that number to match. This is my 95%. We don't have pure alfalfa. There's maybe some weeds. There's something else in it. And my nitrogen concentration. So if I don't put any value in here, it'll automatically populate, I believe 2.4%, which is a standard literature amount. I know that they had some nitrogen deficiencies, so I've lowered this coefficient for this year. And that also was shown, and this is not a huge biomass for a first year. So we're not done yet, because after we cut that alfalfa in, let's say, end of July, there was still unharvested regrowth before snowfall that we need to account for. So this is where you can go out and estimate how much did the alfalfa grow back before the winter came. And I'm going to put that as 910 pounds per acre, and increasing my nitrogen coefficient to 2.2%. So we're leaving this first year, year 1, with alfalfa bales exported, but we still have positive nitrogen in the system. Year 2, we're going to quickly run through. We have no imports, but 2 cuttings as our export, which whenever we have 2, that means we have 3 nitrogen fixation stage. So our exports, we have 2 1.5 or 1,500 pounds per acre at the first cut and second cut. And then 3 nitrogen fixation stages We have our hay, and both times I'm matching that to what our export was, and then the unharvested regrowth at the end instead. This time I called it forage legume for green manure. This doesn't change the calculation, but helps me remember what it was classified as by what I did with it. So because this is the end of year 2, they plow down that alfalfa to get the seedbed ready for the next year's wheat. And this year there was only an export and nitrogen fixation. We didn't import anything. So now our total nitrogen is actually 55.3 just for this year. And are exporting phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur. So year 3, wheat. This is where we just have import export. We don't have nitrogen fixation. So my import is 130 pounds per acre seeding densely for weed control. My export, let's say I got 30 bushels to acre. And my moisture content, I'm putting a standard moisture content. But if you know what you took it off the field as, maybe you took it wet from the field, then you can put your actual moisture content in here before you dried it, as long as that associates to the weight you pulled off the field. And no nitrogen fixation. So the end of this year is what we've just exported nutrients onto here for flax. So again, same as wheat, we have an import. I'm putting in 45 pounds per acre. An export flaxseed at 21 bushels per acre. And there's no nitrogen fixation. This is our flax year. So just the NPKs that we've exported that year. So our final summary for this rotation is that we've actually exported more nutrients that we brought in. Even though we have this alfalfa growing nitrogen for us, we had a great wheat crop. We had a good flax crop after. So we've exported more nutrients than that alfalfa was able to fixate. One sec. Okay. Ooh, much better. So what if we go back into the system and change something and we add the manure? So if I go back to year 1 and say, I want to see what would have happened if I added manure before this alfalfa and put in, oh, 20,000 pounds of manure, composted manure per acre. So we're putting in 10 tons. And this is a lot of NPK in us. We're putting a lot of fertility in. And we can see our final summary that actually puts us in the positive for our nitrogen. We still have a small deficiency for phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur, but they're around 0, and I'm okay with that. If I am plus or minus 1 in my phosphorus, that's good for a maintaining budget. For my potassium, plus or minus 5, that's great. Same for sulfur. If I'm plus or minus 2 to 5, that's good. These are nutrients that we typically have good reserves of, that I'm feeling less critical to have them, but I want to get them close to 0. For our nitrogen, having a positive surplus of nitrogen in excess can mean I have runoff, but if I didn't start this crop rotation this 4 years with excess nitrogen, then I probably have a depleted bank account and need to bring more nitrogen in. So having some excess after a 4-year rotation is good. The other thing that Dr. Martinez likes to talk about is nitrogen and its relationship to carbon sequestration. And if we don't have enough nitrogen, we are volatilizing off organic matter in our soil to make the nitrogen that is there accessible to plants. So having some excess nitrogen is actually how we can start allowing our fields to do carbon sequestration. And we need appropriate amounts in our bank account. So this is where soil samples come in. Is if I do a soil sample, I know, did I start with a negative bank account and I'm actually just building back up? Or did I start with a bunch of fertility and I actually have excess that maybe I should be burning through? The one thing this didn't account for is this is a paper summary of the same rotation. So 2 years alfalfa, my wheat, my flax, and the average for those 4 years. If I look at the manure one, I actually get a lot higher nitrogen than I did in the previous example where I just went back and added. And why is this, you might say? Well, it's because of this alfalfa. Is when we have alfalfa that has proper phosphorus, we get way more biomass from our alfalfa. And some of us might have seen that. If we have added that manure before we put the alfalfa in, the ability to do nitrogen fixation is way greater. And we'll see more nodulation, we'll see more biomass, we'll see a healthier alfalfa crop that can grow way more nitrogen. So in our previous example, we only had 86 pounds per acre of nitrogen. But if we had actually gone in and added the manure, they're showing 272. So it just shows the impact of having good fertility in those green manure years. Um, the one thing I also touch on is I keep showing these in total, but also annual average. And total is really important to say, okay, what is your rotation? But annual average is more significant because if I just looked at 2014, my total would be a glutton. I have so much fertility. But if I just look at 2016, well, I've just exported a lot of nutrients. Looking at a 4-year average is going to give me a better example of actually what my budget looks like or my bank account over my crop rotation, not just an individual snapshot, which is your total, which will impact whatever year you did last. So, in summary, this tool is free and it can help you think about and understand nutrient flows through your system. So that is imports and exports. It can be used, it's quick, it's simple, and it has pretty low complexity. It's just putting in your values, and if you don't have them, guessing. You can still extrapolate and get a lot of useful information with hypotheticals. The other ifs, ands, or buts, the caveats to this, is interpreting your budget for your rotation. Green manure, we might have a large nitrogen surplus. We can get a high grain yield, and it's a large deficit. So we go, yes, we have a great wheat crop. We get a lot of money. We also export a lot of nutrients. Removing straw and K, we get a large potassium deficit and especially a large phosphorus deficit anytime we're getting rid of biomass or plant matter. An annual budget near zero is perfect. That's what we want. However, a budget that's balanced might not necessarily be good because low imports and low exports is a perfectly balanced budget, which is a fallow field. We're farming, we're not leaving our fields blank. But if we wanted to have perfect budgets, we would just leave them alone and then they would be. So we want to try and balance what we're importing because our goal as farmers is to produce food, fiber, and forage to export off our fields. But we want this nutrient budgeting to be optimized or to have some cash flow. Cash flow is my favorite analogy when I talk about nutrient budgets because I like to think of it as your soil bank account. And what are you putting into your bank account now that you can access later? Our nitrogen is like a checking account. It's really volatile. We can bring a lot in a single year, but also we can spend it all in a single year. We have that bank account go up and down really quickly. Our phosphorus, our potassium, and our sulfur are more like savings accounts. And potassium and sulfur, we know actually started with relatively big accounts in the prairies. A lot of farms have a lot in this bank account, even though we've been exporting for years. But our potassium is one that maybe might not be the biggest bank account, or maybe we have some of it locked up in a TFSA. We can't access it right now because it's in rock phosphate or it's deep in the soil. Maybe we're spending a lot of years slowly draining that bank account. And when we want to add phosphorus in, it takes a lot of time to add fertility, add phosphorus back to a field. It can be really hard to get phosphorus back into your land. So I like to think of that one as my savings account, that I want to try and have a nice savings account with good phosphorus availability for my plants. And unbalanced budgets can sometimes be good. If we are very low, like I said beginning, we need to aim for a surplus. So building up that bank account, we need to invest into our soil. And if our nutrient levels are very high, we know that we're going to experience nutrient loss to the environment. So we want to aim for a deficit. We want to deplete that bank account. And maybe that means moving things from one field to the other. And lastly, things to consider in a scenario is not all nitrogen fixation is the same. So this is just talking about alfalfa, is if we can have a high yield of alfalfa in biomass, but low fixation, we look at those roots, there's no nodulation. We did not have the biology that this fixated anything. We might still have a deficit growing alfalfa, and especially if we're exporting it. But if we are able to grow a high fixating, healthy alfalfa crop with still a good yield, we might have a surplus. And that's where we want to be growing these legumes to add to our soil. Soybeans is a great example people love to talk about because soybeans hate sharing. Well, soybeans will fixate a ton of nitrogen. They're actually great at fixating nitrogen. They just use it all to grow their own soybeans at the end of the season. So they have a moderate or a large fixation, but also a large yield. They pull out what they've made. So for more resources on Nutrient Budgeting app, we have them on Pivot and Grow, as well as you can access the tool on the Nutrient Budget app .com. On Pivot and Grow, we have a quick start guide to walk you through and also some videos that Deb made that are actually beautiful. She could do voice acting if she ever wanted. Uh, for the tool itself, it was made with data and developed by Natural Systems Agriculture Lab at the University of Manitoba. So we like to credit the work that they did to make this possible, and several sponsors that made it possible. So it was supported by POTIF, which is sponsored by both Grain Millers, Nature's Path, and Prairie Heritage Seeds, as well as funding externally from AFC, Manitoba Conservation Climate, and Sask Wheat. So that's all I have for my slides. I think, Deb, do we want to open for questions now, or should I do some live showing in the recording?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Marika. Up to you. If folks have questions, any questions so far, you're welcome to, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can type them into the chat. And if we don't hear from anybody at the moment, I would say to just do a few live demos.
Take the silence as an opportunity to blow my nose.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, yeah, it doesn't seem like anybody has any questions at the moment, so I think we just do some demos now. Oh, wait. Oh, it's just a comment. Great presentation. Oh, you're muted.
I didn't want you to hear me honking. So one more thing to show, I forgot on my slides at the end, is other things to think about. There's a really good tool in the Midwest, which is the cover crop tool. And this is to help you pick what cover crop you want to grow based on your goals. So we don't have this available in Manitoba, and it's using Midwest data, so it's not perfect. But if I use Cavalier as just like the highest north place of North Dakota, it's still going to be a different grow zone than me. But it gives me an idea of how this tool works to show you potential cover crops that might help your goals. So if soil building and quick growth is my goal, it will recommend based on a scale of like doing spring barley is a great cover crop. It's not going to do a nitrogen fixation, but I didn't put that as one of my goals. They have this available for Atlantic Canada, and I know Dr. Yvonne Lawley is talking about building something applicable for the prairies in Canada. We just get to the same issue of data, is we don't have as much data as we'd like on things like cover cropping and the nitrogen fixation these plants can do, which it is beautiful these tools exist, but they've been made on a lot of research data to be as accurate as possible. And the other one that I really like is this graph that I was shown by Dr. Sasha Lowen on where nitrogen is going. And while it can leave through runoff and leaching, we also know that it can be used to build soil organic matter, but we also have seen that it can go deeper into the soil layer. So when we were doing different soil profile tests at different depths. And depending on what they grew, we were seeing that the concentration of nitrogen increased with those depths. So actually that what we saw on our topsoil was less than what we did going 200 centimeters down. And I think that's really cool to show that there are nutrients that are becoming accessible and basically putting into the bank account. Our soil is putting them in so that a crop like alfalfa or anything rooted can access it, and we're not losing it on our topsoil. So I will pull up.
And while you're pulling the website up, Marika,
Yeah.
it's just designed at this point for desktop use, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We've talked about making it more mobile friendly. It's hard because there
Yeah.
are so many numbers you're putting in.
Yeah.
So here is tool, and I'll see if I can see you a little better. Okay. Oh, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll log out just to show you when the landing page. When you first come in, you'll see the login page to sign up if you don't have an account or log in, forgot your password. We have had 2 instances of people not getting a sign-in code, and these just had to do with government emails. So if you are trying to use a company agronomy or a government email and it's not, try using your personal email. And that's rectified it when we've had that problem in past. And our company email works fine. I've had people work fine, but just know if you're not getting that notification, try a different email. When you first come in, you will see blank white screen, and I need to start populating. So I will pick my fields. I'm going to use an example that's already been populated. So I was just at the OA conference, and Andy is a Alberta farmer that sat down and worked with me on his last couple year rotation to put it into the app. So I will name this EW1C is his field name, and this is a field with irrigation. So this is the piece of the pie that is EW1C. And this is really important that I put acres because some of our yields were in total mass. And then save field info, making sure we click save as we go along. Otherwise, it will not save until you have clicked enter or save for that data. So you'll leave the page and come back and everything will be on. So when we are starting, we can add to start year or add a year to the end. When we have the blank will be like in my slide where you can put the first year you want. So you can say, I want to start at 2014 or 2022, and you can just populate in a box what year you started. I want to start in 1500. Sure, that works. Whatever you need. This is just to help you remember. So for this first year, we went in, and this is a fall crop. So we are importing rye. So here are all of my list of potential imports that I can pick from. And I'm going to go down and pick my rye seed. What am I seeding this as? So 100 pounds per acre and standard moisture content, unless I took a test. This moisture content doesn't auto-populate, so I have to put that in, but most often we know what we want the dryness of these crops to be. And then hen manure pellets. Now, Andy bought pelletized chicken manure and put it on his field, and it's a 5-3-2 manure. And he put this in as 150 pounds per acre. And I think we know this if any of you have used or worked with farmers that have used pelletized chicken manure, you need to add quite a lot to see anything. So even with that and 0% moisture content, we're not importing that much nutrients through this chicken manure. So pelletized chicken manure is not an import we have on the app. So how do I add it? Well, I can go up to the top in my fields to nutrient sources. And at nutrient sources, these are all the values that the app is using. So this is the NPKS value that it's using when you put in rye. If I don't see what I need here, and also if you don't know the moisture content, we have examples here for all of them. I can add it as my own custom input. So I can go to a source name and call it chicken poop, whatever I want. If it is a crop, I can put in the bushel weight so that those calculations are easy, but this is not. And then use case, is it something I'm importing? A seed that maybe is not in the app? We talked about this a lot actually, because one of the crops that Andy uses is sainfoin. So I'd call that both. It is imported and exported. In this case, I'm only importing. And save entry. Once I've saved it as a name, I'll come to the bottom where I have all my custom inputs. And I will click plus and add addition. This is where I put my NPKS value, and I can put a note. So let's say I get chicken manure every year. Well, I could say a note and say this was 2023's chicken manure, because I'm getting an NPKS sheet with that manure every year when I buy it, or I'm sending it away and getting tested. That way, the next year, I can save that and add an addition, so 2024. And when I go to use the tool, it will have them as chicken poop dash whatever I've put in this column. So that's just a way of putting it on their note. You can leave that blank if you want. So I already have this put in, so I'm just going to delete all that. And actually confirm this hen manure pellets. I've named it 532 because that was the nutrient profile for those pellets. And the moisture content for the test was about 10% when they have these values. So for dry would be here. So when they've tested it, it was 10. I've put it as 0% for my import. So I can go back to my fields. Any of my fields, it'll show up. And now this is here as a custom value, and it will just be alphabetical in the list. So in reality, I should put this as 10, which is going to decrease even further what was here, because when we dry it out, we have a little bit more concentration by weight. And remembering to click enter or save. So that was the end of year one. We fall seeded this, so we put the pelletized chicken manure in with the rye. So we go into the next year, and we have planted chickpeas and flax. So we seeded 80 pounds per acre for chickpeas at a 14% moisture, and then flax at 30 pounds per acre. And this was, that rye was just for weed control. So in the spring, that rye grew up and then was plowed under. So I don't put anything in my budget because, again, that's that magic box. The rye, it didn't do any nitrogen fixation, but it did something for our field. There's a reason we grew it, but it was just to do a fall cover crop and then plow under as a way of weed control. Now, Andy had a sad year and he had a total crop loss on that flax and chickpea. So he went out to the field and all of the chickpeas were rooting really good. They had about a 1-inch little taproot on them. They were looking great. Came out a week later, the chickpeas were gone. It believes that there was actually a fungus and it completely ate the entire chickpea body. So he had dirt. So he suffered his losses and pivoted and planted oats in that field. Now, this is where that chickpea and flax, it might be easy just to ignore it from our budget, but we did import a small amount of nitrogen, especially in those chickpea seeds. Chickpeas are huge. So when we're seeding a dense chickpea crop, we are actually importing small amounts of nutrients. And it's important to account for every little bit that we're putting into our farm. So we pivoted, we put in 2 bushels per acre of oats. And at the end, Andy exported that as oat straw. So from my exports, I have the same, I have all of these values. I'm putting in oat straw, and he figured he had about 6,000 pounds per acre of oat straw that he cut and baled, or 3 tons per acre. This is where I actually went and reduced this to 5,000. So I took off 1,000 pounds and put it as oat seed, because the value we have for oat straw is just the straw itself, as if you harvested it as a crop and then had something come in and bale the straw for bedding or something else, not as entire straw, which is what Andy did, and he cut it. So I put 2 values, one for my straw and one for my seed that I've exported both. So this year there was no fixation. I just had that oat crop coming in and coming out. So if I was just to look at my nutrient budget here for this year, I've exported 46 pounds of N, and this year I only put in 10. So I'm at a significant deficit right now. So now we're on to 2024, and we're going to do some weed control and growing some nitrogen. So this is where Andy actually got a solid chicken manure, so not the pelletized, but from a laying barn, and it was mixed with bedding and other things. And we're just using the literature value because we didn't get that tested. But this is where if we got it tested, I would want to go back to the custom values and add my own values under chicken manure. For the mass, we had 288 metric tons total. Now, this is where I've learned you actually can't put a value in here that is over 5 digits. So if you wanted to put in 288 metric tons in just pounds, it will not let you. That's way too much for it to calculate. So I actually put it into pounds per acre myself before putting it in to this tool, which equates to 7,937. And this was relatively dry for chicken manure. It had already been composted a bit. So we are putting a moisture content of 50, and you can see that chicken manure is bringing in a ton of nutrients. So after putting in chicken manure, put that in and did alfalfa seed. In alternate rows with buckwheat. So this was alternating rows alfalfa and buckwheat. And I actually don't think it was alfalfa. I think that this is what I've named. No, this one actually was alfalfa. So we've done alfalfa with buckwheat, and we're seeding the buckwheat at 50 pounds per acre and 5 pounds per acre alfalfa. And then we have this manure that's come in. So the buckwheat and alfalfa were exported, and our buckwheat, we had 35 metric tons of total buckwheat. So again, this would be, I was able just to put in 35 metric tons of total buckwheat in pounds, not as pounds per acre, because I know it was total, and I put my acreage up here at the top. For that total export, we had 50% dockage. So I might want to say, well, actually only half of that was buckwheat. Why would I put it all in? But we still exported all of that seed, even though that 50% was probably lamb's quarter or other weed seed, we're still exporting weed seed. So unless your weed seed was volunteer oats or volunteer something that you know what it is, and we can put the nutrient value in for that crop, we're going to want to put our total export value, even if it wasn't all buckwheat, even if we had 50% dockage. And then our alfalfa, and he figured he had 100 pounds per acre of alfalfa. So a really good year for the buckwheat and alfalfa as far as profitability. But we grew that alfalfa, and that alfalfa is a legume. So we have to go back to nitrogen fixation, and I'm going to put 6,000 or 3 tons for the biomass of that alfalfa. Because I harvested it for seed, my export doesn't really equate to this. So I have to look at what that alfalfa did during the season. How tall was it? If I don't know the biomass, I can extrapolate by going, okay, what percentage of the field was alfalfa? How many feet tall did the alfalfa get? And there's a lot of online calculators and ag insurance programs, and I'm sure in agronomy is calculating your biomass based on these factors. So figure there was about 3 tons of biomass before he cut that alfalfa, and it's alfalfa. So the voluntary regrowth was 500 pounds per acre. I called this hay and not green manure because Andy did not till this under. He left the alfalfa for regrowth to come back the next year, where she's going to leave in alfalfa. So this was playing with what a real example would look like. And we did this for another one of Andy's fields that was a little bit more complicated, with putting in field peas and alfalfa and hairy vetch and baling it we can put that in, as well as exporting specific crops. So actually this I called alfalfa seed, but was actually sainfoin. So you can look up and find the NPKs values for sainfoin, even though it's not a crop we have available, and put that in.
Thanks. Thanks, Marika. I'm looking at
Yeah.
the time here. It's 9:28. We can go over a little bit if people have questions. So maybe at this point, we will open it up to questions. There was a question in the chat. Is there a website that this person can check large scale farm site data for best legumes for nitrogen fixation in Northwest Manitoba that you know of?
Yeah, hi Dave. We don't have one for best fixation. The best thing would be that Midwest cover crop tool that I shared, and I can share a link for that because I know you said you joined late. Um, the other option is like going in and playing. I can tell you, just like anecdotally, faba beans, if you can get them to grow, are the most gluttonous nitrogen fixators. They are so good at it, but can be relatively challenging to get a good establishment, especially being north. Uh, just any like edible bean, it's harder to grow where we are, but I do know Manitoba farmers that have successfully grown. And then here in the chat, I've shared this cover crop tool for Midwest, and they are using um, all available cover crops and their ability to fit your needs. So if it's weed suppression, it'll give you examples of nice, dense coverage that will grow fast. If you are wanting nitrogen building, it will give you examples of what North Dakota is the best nitrogen fixators available to. So it's not going to hit us for northern Manitoba. It's several growing zones different at that point. I know just the difference of like Boissevain versus where I am in Newdale is different. We're wet and cold, but it will give you a bit of an idea of what they're using in that climate.
Okay, thanks. And then another question, I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, but I guess, are you wondering where to test solid manure for the nutrients? Uh, if you want to clarify, you can feel free to unmute yourself. It just says, is there anything? Oh, just test strips. Does that work for testing solid manure? Or, oh, you're muted again, Marika.
I don't know if I understand the question.
Yeah. Um, Dave, you can, if you like, you can unmute yourself and
Okay.
ask.
Yeah, I was just wondering, instead of sending it away, is there a way I can, mix just they used to have like for your garden, you could test, kind of whatever the nutrients you have. Is there something we can get that'll work for solid like the manure so that I have a better idea of what I'm putting on? Because it varies so much, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually don't know of any home tests other than sending it away, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, I've been looking at it's hard to find anything. I just thought maybe you guys had something.
No, I don't know of any, but that piques my curiosity, so I'll ask around and see. And I have your contact, so I can reach out if I find something.
All right, thank you.
Did anybody have any other questions about either the nutrient budgeting or the app itself? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, well that's thank you so much, Marika. This has been awesome. It was definitely a really, yeah, great presentation to lead up into the actual use of the app because I know, and that's kind of why we created those video tutorials and the document, right? Because when you first kind of log into the app, it's just like you said, like a white screen, and you're kind of like, what do I do now? So yeah, I encourage anybody that hasn't signed up yet and is looking to, you know, check out those tutorials, and this obviously was a great one to actually how to use the app. So thank you very much, Marika. Any further thoughts or any are there any planned updates or additions to the app at this point, or it's just kind of more about, yeah, promoting, getting it out there at this point?
Yeah, promoting, getting it out there, and collecting feedback. If there
Yeah.
are ways that this could be modified to suit your farm better, please let us know. We're going to be promoting it for the rest of this season and then all of next winter. And then in 2026, hopefully opening the tool again to make some improvements based on farmer suggestions.
Awesome. Good. Well, and yeah, some thank yous for the great presentation there, Marika, in the chat. So thanks everybody for joining, and thanks again to Marika for the great presentation today here with us. So I think at this point, it's 9:34. We will call the meeting to a close. If anybody wants a copy of the recording of this this meeting, just send an email to admin@saskorganic.com and I will send you a copy. So, all right, well, have a good day, everybody. Bye. Thanks again, Marika.